Hello, today I'm going to be talking about the gut-brain axis and using nutrigenomics and gut health to hopefully help ease your anxiety. The information I share is training and doesn't replace a relationship with your qualified health professional, should not be considered health or medical advice. I don't know your health and family history and what's going on, so I'm sharing this as training. The unauthorized reproduction or distribution of this work is not permitted, and I have provided resources throughout today. So if there's a particular image or research paper that you'd like to know more on, you can delve in and read into it. So today I'm going to introduce the integrative and functional medicine model for supporting people diagnosed with anxiety or living with anxiety symptoms. A little bit about me. I am university qualified integrative and functional medicine nutritionist. I have a master's of integrative medicine here in Australia, and I've got a very special interest in gut health, pediatrics, autoimmune, nutrigenomics, skin conditions, and mold illness. I have done the Institute of Functional Medicine and I'm on their register, and I've also am a member of the Functional Genomics Institute. I've supported hundreds, probably thousands now, of people around the world in regaining their gut and overall health, energy, and confidence. Mental health, I will share the statistics that I know from Australia, is it is quite significant. And in our young people, it's increasing as well. So you may be listening today for yourself, you may be listening for a family member or a child. And what we know is 1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 85 have experienced a mental health condition. It may be acute, it may be chronic, it may be ongoing, or it might have been short-lived. What the studies show is we do know it is about 1 in 5 have experienced an anxiety disorder. And the number is quite significant in our children. What the studies show that it's about 1 in 7 children and adolescents have experienced a mental health illness as well. So it's quite significant. Common signs and symptoms of anxiety. So this is compliments of Headspace, which I'm going to show you their website in a minute because it is an excellent resource if you're not aware of it. And look, we all experience anxiety at different points in our life, and it all shows up quite differently. Where it can be a problem is where it is chronic and it's not allowing us to live a full life. And for some people, some of the symptoms can be a racing heart, fast breathing, feeling tense, sweating, dizzy, shaking, butterflies, and feeling sick in the stomach. And I hear that a lot with children when they say they've got stomach aches. Some other people often flush and they get really hot and they you can actually see it on them when they say, look, they're starting to have an anxiety attack. They feel it. This is a Headspace website. So again, I think it's a really great resource. So they've got a fact sheet on anxiety. They've got a great video, which you can show if you've got older children or adolescents. They go through what thoughts can include. So thoughts when you're anxious could be worrying or fear, feeling like you're out of control, having trouble concentrating and paying attention, and things just may seem more out of proportion. Other signs are you can't relax, avoiding places, people, schools, parties, withdrawing from family, feeling annoyed, irritated, restless, and impact on sleep. So either sleeping a lot for some people, or finding it really difficult to get to sleep or waking up and staying awake. So they talk about common types of anxiety, generalized social, separation, agoraphobia, whereas you're not feeling comfortable leaving the home, panic. And then some people have specific phobias. They delve into panic attacks and also give some tips on how to manage it. So caring for yourself, obviously, eating well, sleeping, and we're going to talk a bit about that in this lesson today. Talking with it with family, noticing your thinking patterns and being aware you are not your thoughts, you're the observer of your thoughts, being aware of avoidance, breathing strategies, and I'll talk about why that's really important. and also limiting your use of alcohol and other drugs. It does talk about support services. So I think it's very useful, especially if you've got children or other loved ones. You can point them in the direction of this, and also some apps that can help with relaxation and breathing. So, and of course, at the top, they've got if you need emergency help and things like that. So you can click on that. So I highly recommend this website. It's excellent. And feel free to share it with people because they may not be aware it exists. So, taking an integrative and functional medicine approach, so it's everything that they said on that Headspace website, but it's also working through, okay, as they said, cleaning up the diet, making sure that you're eating really well, like they said, not drinking and using alcohol and other drugs to numb yourself, supporting deficiency and sufficiency. So, working through for you, is there an issue with intake of nutrients, but also the absorption of your nutrients and minerals? And for some people, it's about working through, look, what I call dismantling dysfunction. So, working out what could be some of the root causes and triggers for anxiety. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. So, some of those things, lifestyle factors, sleep, relaxation, relationships, nutrition, good quality water. Are there any pre-existing factors like genetics? You may look up your family history and see that you've got parents or grandparents who suffered with mental health. It might also be social influences, and again, gut health and biochemistry, which we're going to talk about today. So, when you talk about literature, there's different levels. Systematic reviews basically is a summary of all the research that's come before when someone's actually asking a research question. Then it goes down to randomized control trials. So that's where they've said we've got a group here and we've got a group here, and we're going to see if we have try an intervention on one group and not on the other group, what's the change? Right down to what's my thought and opinion. So, levels of evidence is really important when I'm looking at research. I do look at expert opinions and reviews like this bottom bit, but as much as I can, I always look higher up that triangle. So, this was a systematic review on looking at the gut in anxiety and depression. And what they found was they looked at articles and they came up with 24 articles, noting that 20 were conducted in China. So, when you are looking at research, you are trying to look at cohorts which are similar to the population you are looking at. But in saying that, this was a well-constructed study, and that's why I'm looking at it. What they did find was the gut microbiome, microbiome, the composition of it was quite different for those who had anxiety and depression compared to those who didn't. And what we found was that some of the bacteria that are opportunistic and can cause inflammation and other issues in the gut were higher. And also, what we found was the abundance of certain protective bacteria were lower. And I suppose this diagram is from that article. Um, what they're saying in this, and this is what the latest research is really indicating, is it's a bidirectional mechanism which is working. And I think what we're learning is that the gut-brain axis includes this neural, immune, and chemical signal network, and it's highly complex. It's not linear. It's not easy to understand, and I suppose that's why the research is continuing. But what we do know is there are these neural networks, which include the enteric nervous system and vagus nerves, and all of these really powerful pathways that come out of the cranium, the brain. So, what we do know is that abnormal enteric nervous system aggravates pathological changes and impacts that presentation of anxiety and depression. And That's why when we look at things like headspace, they say breathing. Deep breathing, meditation, relaxation works on this bidirectional pathway because what it's doing is engaging those vagus nerves and helping with that tone. So it's very, very powerful. It's a great paper if you're interested in reading it. The link's there. You can easily look it up. Um, and just trying to work through for you what's going on in your gut. Excuse me for a minute. So, this is a link to another paper that said, look, the more people are eating the Western diet, which is high in saturated fats, high in very sugary foods, the higher their inflammation and the less diversity they have in their gut, and the higher their risk for mental health illness. The more that people are eating a high variety of foods, and we think that, you should be eating between 30 to 50 different varieties of food a week. And that sounds like a lot, but I guarantee you, if you start to write a list, you'll see that it adds up very quick. And that's because we want that diversity in the gut. And that diversity can be very protective because it's increasing the basically anti-inflammatory approach to the gut, which is then having that bidirectional impact on the brain. So, when we look at the gut test, so this is a poo test that you can do at home, very easy to do. What we often find is, I always look at the last page first. So, I'm always looking at this page here. And if calprotectin is high, then what we know is there's intestinal inflammation, and that can trigger systemic inflammation in the body. So, that's a very important thing that I'm looking at. If it is very high, if it's over, 150 or even 100, definitely if it's over 200, I'm writing to your GP to say this needs medical investigation. Secretory IgA. So, most certainly, I have seen people with very low secretory IgA and very chronic anxiety. And when we've worked on increasing this, the anxiety has lessened and then gone away. And so, low secretory IgA can mean a weakened mucosal barrier. And what it can mean is there's that higher vulnerability to chronic stress and anxiety. And here's the rub: chronic stress reduces the secretory IgA. So we're in this kind of interesting situation where people have it very low is, okay, how do we get you out of how you're feeling to get it up to help you feel better? And also trying to work out, well, what's it caused? Why has it been low? You've probably heard of leaky gut, which we prefer to call it intestinal permeability, and that's the zonulin. So if you have a high level of zonulin, which this person does in this sample report, so if it's over 70 or 80, what it can indicate is there is intestinal permeability. And then if there's opportunistic bacteria, these guys here, which are releasing lipopolysaccharides, so they come from gram-negative bacteria. What that means is those LPS can basically get through those tight junctures in the gut lining because you've got the high level of zonulin and the protein gets into the bloodstream, and it's there where we think it's affecting the HPA axis, the vagus nerve, leading to a higher level of stress and anxiety. So most certainly, when I'm thinking about the opportunistic bacteria here, I'm trying to make sure that, things particularly like Clostridia and Citrobacter and Klebsiella are not there or they're low because they can most certainly interfere with dopamine production, elevate anxiety, and I see it a lot, especially in children because it can be very obvious because they can't mask often, irritability and mood swings. So, the gut test can tell us a lot. And I do have an extra video if you do want to watch more about the GI map. The other thing to think about when we're looking at the gut test is your good bacteria. So if you do have low beneficial bacteria, so these are really important for good health, particularly lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, then, sometimes I do see people who it improves, their anxiety improves because some strains of these bacteria can be very calming. Um, so that's that. When I look at the organic acid and the urine test, so this is a wee, which basically it's a metabolomic test that gives us ideas around what's going on with your biochemistry to see, look, is there any hints there that's driving your anxiety? Especially when we combine it with something like the GI map. Um, so, just jumping ahead here, there is a neurotransmitter section. So it's not the actual dopamine and serotonin we're measuring, it's the metabolites of that. But what it can do is give us clues. So high levels of dopamine or high levels of norepi or epinephrine can indicate overstimulation or a stress-driven response. And low levels can indicate nutrient deficiencies or mitochondrial issues, which can impact neurotransmitter synthesis. So, what we're trying to do is have a look here to see what's going on. The same with the serotonin metabolites. Again, if it's very, very low, again, I'm looking to see, look, why could that be? So, thinking about your neurotransmitters like a sink, I'm always thinking about the genes that instruct the enzymes. So, is there a plug that's letting the serotonin and the dopamine drain out too quick, or is it more an input problem that's impacting? When I look at quinolinic acid, we don't want it to be high. So, when it's high, it means there's neural inflammation. So, again, it's a really good measure for me to understand how are you converting your tryptophan? Are you converting it down a particular pathway to make serotonin and melatonin, which is great, or is it more down a toxic pathway where you're using it to make quinolinic? And again, we use nutraceuticals and food and lifestyle things to help get it back into range. Um, Also on this test, we're looking at some microbial overgrowth. So Clostridia definitely can impact dopamine metabolism and it can impact how you feel. Arabinose can cause brain fog. It's a great marker for yeast. People often think about candida when they think about yeast, and it is linked to irritability, anxiety as well. Um, when I'm looking at the last page of the organic acid test, I'm looking at the detox section. So I'm seeing how well is your detox and methylation pathways functioning. And when these are high, it can point to things like ammonia toxicity, low glutathione, things that can really impact how you make healthy DNA and cells and also how you feel. Um, just jumping back a bit, also the nutritional markers. So it gives me a good clue as to, how much of your B vitamins are playing into this. What do we need to do to get that balance back? I do have a video on this as well on my YouTube channel if you want to know more. When we think about methylation, so you may or may not have heard of this term. So it's basically how do you make healthy DNA in cells? How do you detoxify? And how do you make energy and also your neurotransmitters? So often people talk about MTHFR. Oh my gosh, I've got the MTHFR gene. And if I hear one more person just hone in on that and nothing else, you know, I feel like I'm going to poke myself because it's missing everything else. It is a very important gene that instructs the enzyme on how to take folate into the methionine cycle, but it's not everything. And when I think about anxiety in particular, I'm thinking about how does MTHFR work with methionine synthase, which is MTR, methionine synthase reductase. In particular, I'm looking to see if you're a slow or fast comped. Sorry, I've got some of these over here. So if you do the Smart DNA Advanced Pathways test, you get a 300 or 400 genes. It's a 100-page test, so it looks like this. Um, Quite difficult for you to understand, but it gives me lots of clues as to what could be driving this. So definitely trying to work through, is there anything here? And also looking through to see, what's going on with this gene as well, the BHMT. So, how good are you at converting methionine to make homocysteine, to bring down here to make energy, glutathione, but also taking the short route back up to make more methionine. So look, it all is very important and all way more than just that MTHFR gene. Also looking at if you do have quite significant anxiety, I'm also looking at the inflammation section. So if interleukin 6, like in this case, is red, it can create a pro-inflammatory tendency. So again, what I'm trying to do is when I'm looking at this in the context of what your symptoms are, trying to work through how do I help build the scaffolding around you so you feel really well and can thrive and be your best in this world, whilst trying to manage the genetics that you were given by your parents. One thing I will say, and I do give you this lesson when I go through this with you, is when you look at this test, if you get a whole bunch of reds, which everyone gets reds, everyone gets oranges, it's how we are. Otherwise, we'd all be identical, and that would be a problem. Everyone has what we call a genetic SNP, a single nucleotide polymorphism, I think it's 300 or 400 genes. So everybody's report looks colourful. It just, for you, depends where yours are at and how do they work together and what slows things down and what speeds things up. It doesn't always mean that they're expressing, and this is a classic one like celiac disease. If you're orange, it doesn't mean you have celiac disease, but what we know, it's a very small proportion, I think it's about 5% of people who have the genes get celiac disease. So it's very rare to get, you can't get it, I don't think, celiac disease if you don't have the genes. But again, it doesn't mean that that gene's expressing, but what it does is gives us clues. Um, so in that instance, it's super powerful. Here's another biochemical map. Like we've got hundreds and hundreds of these biochemical pathways going on in our body 24/7. This second, this second, this second, they're all working. Our body is phenomenal. What this pathway does is helps me understand. You might have remembered me saying quinolinic acid before on that urine test. So that's that. It's red because it's neurotoxic. You don't want it high. So again, what I'm trying to work out when I'm looking at things like this is saying, right, what's going on? There's dopamine, there's serotonin, and there's melatonin. What could be possibly draining things too quick? Don't have the right input. This actually links to the other image I showed you before. So if your methylation is not working well, then yes, you will have flow-on effects with your neurotransmitters. So that's why I always start with methylation because it will have flow-on effects. And if you just start honing in by saying, oh my gosh, what is my neurotransmitter genetics, these ones, going, I'm going to do stuff for that, you're missing the point. So we've got to go upstream. We've got to start right at the beginning and say, okay, well, what's potentially happening for you in your body and go that way. And that's where I get good results with people. Other areas to investigate. So hair mineral analysis is excellent. So you take a piece of hair close to your scalp, you send a couple of centimeters off to the lab. You have to discard the rest. So if you've got long hair, it feels like a waste, but it's not because what it does is it tells us what are your minerals and also are you carrying any heavy metals. Heavy metals won't make you feel great. They got to come out. They're not great to have in your body. I suppose when I'm seeing anxiety, the first thing I'm looking at is copper and zinc. So often I'll see really high copper, like in this case, and zinc, which is lower. You do want your reference to be around this level here. So this is a great test to have a look. It's also looking at, like I said, to see what's the balance of the other minerals. This person's detoxification's not the greatest. Their molybdenum's not in balance with their sulfur. They're missing boron. So that's really interesting. I'd be thinking about why that is. Maybe they've been exposed to mold. And some of their electrolytes are definitely not in balance. So that will be impacting how they feel, particularly their calcium and magnesium being quite out of whack, and their calcium magnesium not being in ratio with the sodium and potassium as well. So it's another great test. Omega-3, I have not had one come back in balance so yet, and I'm waiting for my own test. And I eat quite a bit of omega-3, so I'm going to be very interested to see what my results are. But yeah, 100% not had one back yet in balance as an initial test. After 6 months of working and having the appropriate oils that are encased in the extra virgin olive oil, people are getting more in balance, which is great. Why do I bring it up here? Because omega-3 is absolutely critical for neural health. And I hear this all the time where people start, they test themselves, then they start taking the omega-3 oils, and they say they feel so much better within weeks. So it is really worth considering doing this. This is a very easy test. You do it at home. You take the omega-3 oils for a period of 6 months and you retest yourself. You don't need me involved at all. If you want to do it on your own, I can put a link in the notes for you to investigate this yourself. And what you do is you get this report that's got really clear graphs that tell you what's your protection level, your omega-3 index, your mental strength, your cell membrane fluidity, and that's what we're really thinking about when we're thinking about your brain and all of your cells. So I really highly recommend that one as well. And if you get stuck, so I don't often order this, a food sensitivity test. This is a IgG um, food sensitivity test. But if people are really stuck, if their gut is in excellent shape, so if their zonulin is almost zero, definitely below 70, and they're still having issues, then, and they want to spend the money because this is an expensive test, then I will order this for them if I think it's appropriate. And look, in the cases where I have run this, it has been instrumental in helping people say, look, actually, those foods are not helpful for you. And I had a client the other day who hers came up egg and chicken. She took it out and she was like, I feel different within a couple of days. So she was eating the foods that she thought were healthy and good for her, but her body, for some reason, had built up an immune response to those foods. So what do? We take them out for 6 months, let the body forget about it, have a little bit of it, then retest and see is that making a difference. But like I said, this is very last resort. I do not order that often. So it's time to stop struggling. If you need help or if you need help with your child, feel free to book an appointment. There are some intake forms. It does help me get my brain into gear before I meet you. Provide me with any copies of previous tests you've done. We'll go really deep into your health, your family history. I'll start thinking about joining dots, what you could get started with. In that initial appointment, you do walk away with a plan. And I'll share with you what I think are the appropriate tests so we can work out, okay, well, which are the ones which might be most appropriate? And then what you can do is decide, do you want to get going and try some things, or do you want to get going and do some tests first? It's up to you. Like I said, you get in each appointment, test results in detail if you do them, nutritional advice if you need recipes, lifestyle suggestions. If you need supplements, I send you a link to a place where they're very high quality, practitioner only, and 20% off, which is even better. Um, and any further advice if you need on testing. And I always answer your questions. And if I don't have the answer, I'll get back to you. So if that feels like it would be helpful for you, feel free to book an appointment. You can also book a free discovery call on my website if you just want to meet me in person and see, look, is this going to be right for you? If you've got particular questions, just book the discovery call and I can answer your questions and then you can work through, is this the right approach? If you want to just get started, then feel free. You just go online and book an appointment. I do have face-to-face clinics as well in Canberra, Australia. So if you do want to see me in person, feel free to book an appointment as well in person. Otherwise, it's by Zoom. All right. Have an awesome day. I hope that's been really helpful. And like I said, get in touch if you have any questions. Take care. Bye for now.